banter, quick-witted, clever, interesting. So if somebody asks you a question, there are frameworks that you can rely on. One would be history, philosophy, and metaphor. It's just a way of structuring your answers. And with those answers, they could be specific, broad, or actually related to a different topic. And if you're wanting to assist your conversation and have some diversity in this, you may want to think about emotion, detail, and restating. And those are those three distinct things that can actually help to engage people. There's a few rules. Avoid speaking in absolutes, really because you don't want to be a twat. Almost everybody who says something is categorically the case is categorically wrong. Yeah, that was intentional. But you understand, it also makes conversation difficult, because if you say to somebody, what do you think is the best such and such? They're thinking, oh no, I'm on the spot here. I need to have an answer that's correct. Otherwise they may judge me. So instead you may want to say, hey, if we had this assumption, what do you think the best this would be? Or perhaps giving somebody options and doing it in a playful way. And when you're speaking to somebody, or speaking with somebody, and they're speaking to you, you actually need to react. If you're just some kind of passive thing, like draining the life force out of them, a banter vacuum, it doesn't help. So really, what you want to do is actually react. You have to think, what emotion are they trying to conjure up in me, and react accordingly. And it may be that you slow it down a bit and have bigger reactions just to convey them. But whatever you do, don't react too quickly, because then you could come across as almost patronizing, or as if you already knew what they were going to say. So the art of a conversation tends to focus on one topic or similar topics. And if you've ever seen a good stand-up comedy, then you'll notice how they'll build something and they will then talk about something else, and they will come back to the initial thread, and then it'll reference their previous jokes, and it's true genius. So if you think of that about a skilled conversation, if you can do a similar approach with your conversations with other people and get your in-jokes built in, particularly if you're building on similarity, if you could say, hey, we've all been in this situation, well, no, you wouldn't say all because that's an absolute, but this situation that somebody can relate to, and then they'll think they're in the inner circle here, and that can be helpful in establishing rapport. This book recommends actually spending a lot of time building a conversation resume in a similar way that you would if you were practicing for a job interview. A job interview, you can predict, they may say, where would you be in 5 years' time, or why do you want the job? And you can predict a lot of conversations. And so I personally think that is an incredibly bad idea, and have got no intention of having kind of scripted conversations for day to day. How's the weather? Well, let me tell you about the weather in Estonia. And here's a funny fact that the Eskimos have so many words for snow. I've just built that up just off the cuff, But the fact is, if you scripted it out as the book suggests, it would sound so artificial and just false, and instead of being engaged in that conversation, you'd be living in your head thinking, oh, was it 50 words for snow, or was it 48? Who cares? Just go with the flow is what I would say. But if you want, you could consider that and have this conversation resume to speak to people about. This suggests a bit about speaking to strangers. It's about having this time boundary that you've potentially artificially put in, because most people day to day are going about busy, they're doing stuff, and they don't actually have an hour to speak to me, you, or some randomer on the street. But if the randomer on the street approaches and maybe can say, hey, I'm just en route to doing this, but what do you think of this? Or have you seen that kind of conversation about observations going on around you at that time, but with a time frame, that can potentially be helpful. Let's talk about compliments. Sure, write some down below, like as well. But no, seriously, a compliment, if you want to make that impactful, you can do it by directing it at somebody's actual choices and an active decision. So if somebody has actively chosen, for example, to buy a particular car, and then you compliment their choice of car, they perhaps would make that, they'd find that much better as a compliment than just saying, yeah, you're really tall or something. Like, yeah, you chose to be really tall, did you? No, of course you didn't. With explanations, ideally keep these short, so shorter than my one just then. But to be witty, you often also, you may want to kind of answer quickly initially, and then if a detailed explanation is required, they'll ask, oh, tell me more, and then, you know, you can give a full, detailed, double explanation if you like. Teasing is an interesting concept, and it's a type of banter, but you have to be sure that the appropriate topic is selected, and it also has to be good-natured. So if somebody really has a short-term thing that isn't really strongly part of their identity, something's untoward's happened one day, say their clothes get like wet by a passing bus or something, yeah, and that isn't always happening, sure, bit of teasing about that, because the next day they'll be there in their pristine, non-damp clothes because the bus hasn't driven past. But if you were to maybe speak about somebody's race, sexual identity, or other things, these are not good for teasing. You don't need me to tell you that it's inherently wrong. But what I'm trying to point out is that if it's teasing, if it's a transient thing that nobody cares about, that's absolutely fine. It does, however, come down to delivery, because you have to make sure that the person can take it in their stride. When you're teasing somebody, you don't want it to be bullying, you want it to be some light-hearted banter. Comebacks are often needed if somebody's teasing you in particular, and it's often a two-step process. You may receive an insult, and in fact, you just agree with it, but then amplify it to an absurd degree to actually show how ridiculous it is. This may also make you appear confident and like the insult doesn't matter at all. So you may want to feel free to purposefully misinterpret sentences, for example, and in ways you could initiate a joke. After all, life is all about having fun. So, hope you've enjoyed that. I put other videos out often about books. Most of them have more learning, so feel free to check out my channel, and I'll see you next time.